Hey, you! Let me show you what it's like to be a new player in TF2. What the TF2 is a game that has literally existed longer than a significant amount of the people watching this video. In the over 1.5 decades that TF2 has been online, ancient veterans have had time to become true god gamers. We all know that feeling, the hatred we feel when some casual level 150 spy of a 12-year-old Steam account and 8,000 hours in TF2 named XX Dorito Smasher XX joins the game and crushes your team. Or that other feeling of sheer despair when you're in a lobby full of bots. In this harsh world, what can a new player do? Can they hope to match the power of such veterans or even hope to combat bots? Can they hope to learn the same countless quirks and foundations of TF2's gameplay that a veteran knows? The simple answer is yes. Yes, they can. With enough time and effort, anybody can master anything. However, the real answer is more complicated. To find such an answer, we must look into what the world offers to these lost souls. What do TF2's tutorials within itself, its natural gameplay, and its community offer to new players in the goal of learning how to be a TF2 master? In this video, I'm going to be looking to that question. Of course, before I do that, I need to ask you a question. Why aren't you subscribed? Correct your sins, my friend. Anyways, let's look into the first point on which a TF2 player could learn how to play. That's right, it's TF2's infamous in-game tutorials. Found on TF2's main game mode menu under the training tab, this is what most new players would naturally gravitate towards when first playing the game. Of course, this is an awful mistake by those poor lost souls, because as it's widely known, these training tutorials suck. The biggest issues of them is that they are far too simple to teach anything of worth other than how to crouch and shoot a few weapons. They are outdated with information that isn't relevant. Of course, it's the issue that there isn't enough of them. Seriously, there's only 4 official tutorials of TF2, those being for Soldier, Demoman, Spy, and Engineer. You'd think that this is because these classes are complicated or something, and that these tutorials are only for these 4 classes because of that, but no, you're wrong. These tutorials aren't even good enough to teach anything complicated about these classes. For example, the Spy course shows the player how to shoot the revolver, use the knife to backstabbing, go invisible in a disguise. Absolutely incredible, I know. I'm sure that anybody with an IQ higher than room temperature will be able to figure out these things within a minute of playing Spy. What I think would have been better is if the Spy course took you through a number of scenarios and guided you through what to do in them. For example, imagine a few scenarios for using the sapper. First, the course would have a scenario that shows you how to sap an unprotected dispenser. Then it would put the player in the scenario in which the dispenser is defended by an engineer. It will teach the player how to use the invisible watch and teach him to make sure to kill the engineer first, which is an important and smart move. Finally, it would put the player in an advanced scenario in which the spy is tasked with taking down a fully built engineer nest with a dispenser and sentry defended by an engineer and a teammate. Here, it would be taught how sticking up and using a watch or the disguise kit and waiting for an opportunity to strike when enemies are distracted is important. It would guide the player through going invisible or disguising themselves out of sight, waiting for enemies to be distracted, then striking the sentry with the sapper, eliminating the engineer, and either running away from or killing any nearby remaining enemies. I know, right? Valve, hire this man. Anyways, let's get back to dunking on these tutorials. The biggest problem of there only being tutorials for less than half of the game's classes is that those that are ignored have things that are hard to learn for new players. For example, Pyro's Air Blast is something that a brand new player would have no idea existed until the first time they decide to press the right mouse button. A new player wouldn't even know how to use Air Blast to push enemies or projectiles, and such a thing would take hours of natural gameplay to even just figure out for the first time. The other problem with there being 5 classes neglected is that it might make new players less likely to pick these classes up when they're starting out. Really, I think this might be ground zero for there being no medic players in TF2. Medic is a very complicated class, and for him to not have any tutorial is a sort of sin. If TF2 had a medic tutorial course that taught the player how medic is important and is a good class to pick for the team, then I think new players and future regulars would play medic more often. The other thing that you can find within TF2's training tab is the offline mode for the game. In offline mode, you can play a match of TF2 with bots filling both teams. games. Here, a player is able to play around with the game without having to worry about the expectations of an online match. This is how I spent my first few hours in TF2, as I was pretty nervous about being really bad in an official online match, and I think that TF2's offline mode is certainly better at teaching the game than the game's official training courses. In fact, playing an offline match is part of Soldier's training course, and it's honestly the only highlight of the training courses. It actually feels like it's teaching you something in a realistic setting. For example, the Soldier course teaches you how to deal with a sentry gun as Soldier with a rocket launcher, because the sentry gun has a limited range. This is actually pretty good at teaching you a few things, and if the other 3 classes available in TF2's training mode had the same treatment, but maybe even an altered match to teach that class's mechanics better, then I think the TF2 training mode wouldn't be so bad. Then the only issue would be having 5 classes missing, which kinda sucks, but you can maybe make excuses for it. It's TF2's offline mode that leads me to my next point, that being how TF2's natural gameplay can teach a new player how to play the game. Any new player's first experience with an actual match of TF2 starts with the class select screen. This screen, in my opinion, is a really good starting point. First of all, the classes are clearly and neatly divided into 3 categories, those being offense, defense, and support. These categories are easy to understand for anybody who has basically any video game knowledge. Second of all, the TF2 mercs are mostly easy to get the general idea of just by reading their names. It's clear that medic is the team medic, that engineer builds things, that spy can infiltrate the enemy, etc. Really, the only confusing names are scout and soldier, and even then it's not terribly confusing. Compare this to a game like Overwatch, where it's hard to tell what Widowmaker or Torbjorn's deals are just by reading their names. This is an excellent example of TF2's game design, and you experience it literally as the first thing you open. After the player picks their class, they're on their own. This sounds pretty bad, but TF2 is easy to grasp quickly, as each class only has 3 or 4 weapons. From this, a new player will easily figure out how to do something like shoot Heavy's minigun or heal with Medic's medigun, but it'll be much harder for them to figure out the more advanced functions of weapons and classes. Things like Pyro's Air Blast or properly using the Medic's Uber are pretty hard to figure out. Nonetheless, with enough time messing around in an offline match, a new player could virtually figure out anything. Of course, all of their hopes and dreams will be shattered within seconds of beating an anime profile picture 4,000 hour spy main, but that's out of the game's control. The final main point at which a new player could figure out how to play TF2 is using the vast resources of the TF2 community. A new player can easily find guides for the game on websites like YouTube or even, God forbid, TikTok. This, in my opinion, is the best part of the internet. Anybody with enough brain cells and determination can learn anything by just watching a few guides. It's really effective, and I mean that. I myself figured out how to make videos through like 2 DaVinci Resolve tutorials I watched on YouTube, and you can see how far it's taken me for so little time spent learning. Anyways, this is certainly an effective way for a new player to figure out how to play TF2. Sit anybody down in front of an Uncle Dane video and you'll have a professional engineer in just moments. Of course, in this case, this is an exaggeration, but it also leads to the second half of online learning. If we're being realistic, a new player won't be able to figure out how to play the game just by watching a few videos, and that's because the other part of learning is actually applying what they learn. In my video editing example from earlier, I still had to use DaVinci Resolve for a few hours to really get it and make videos. Putting everything that I've discussed so far together, I think I know the most efficient way for a lost soul to figure out how to play TF2. If the new player literally knows nothing about FPS games, then the official Valve tutorials are a good start to figure out how to play one. When they're done with that, or if they're already past this stage, then a new player should take to the wonderful world of YouTube and crack open a few guides. Ideally, these first guides are focused on the general game flow of TF2 and the fundamentals of the game's classes, with none of that epic advanced stuff yet. Once the new player has absorbed this knowledge, they should take to an offline match, or even an online match if they're brave enough, and practice what they just learned. Once you're starting to feel good, then it should really move on to online matches to learn more and figure out how real players play. From here, the first 100 or so hours of TF2 for the new player can be spent watching more guides and applying what they learned in the game. Repeat this over and over, and at the very end of it, after many hours and many videos, you've minted a decent player that will forever be in love with the game. Wow, what a sweet ending. I have one last point to talk about, and that's how a new player would learn how to play man versus machine. Its learning process is similar to standard TF2, but it has enough points of difference for it to be in another discussion. There's MVM's bootcamp mode, which seems like a solution for all of your MVM learning problems. It's just like the real thing, but it's free to play. But that's the problem. It's just like the real thing. Throwing a new player into a normal game of MVM is going to wreck them, and that's only made worse by the fact that boot camp is fully online and full of new players. If you know anything about MVM, you know that a lobby full of low tours is usually not a good way to guarantee efficiency and success. New players join boot camp and get stuffed into lobbies full of new players, in which everybody involved will have a bad experience. Players will get dunked on, dollars will be burned, and waves will be failed. The problem of this is that TF2's most efficient learning solution meets a roadblock of this. If a new player goes and watches some of the other much more popular TF2 banana guys videos and then tries to play them in a match of boot camp, things are going to suck. Anybody who plays MVM knows that the game requires a lot of teamwork, and each player's impact on the team is much more significant than their impact in a standard game of TF2. So even if a new player gets loaded of MVM guides, if 3 out of the 6 players on their team know next to nothing or are just incompetent, the new player will have a hard time applying what they just learned. Yes, I am exaggerating a little, and I'm sure that with enough determination and patience, a new player can figure out MVM just by playing boot camp. But that's not my point. My point is that it's not ideal. Boot camp is not an ideal learning environment, and neither is a real game of MVM. In the real paid game of MVM, a new player will easily weigh down their team and get politely asked to stop playing by higher tour players. This gives low tours a bad reputation in MVM, one that has historically been proven true to me, as seen in several of my videos. What I'm trying to say is that MVM needs an offline mode, where a player can mess around with bots. NVM player bots don't necessarily exist at the moment, and their implementation will be hard because NVM is complicated and really needs a lot of player input and strategy. But even a basic team of bots that can play some easy missions can go a far way. This could have many positive effects, with one of them being that bootcamp will have better players because bootcamp players will have more experience on average. This would redeem bootcamp and make it a better learning environment. A new player could climb a ladder of learning and applying. And once they're done, they can be thrown into the real thing and be good gamers. This would even redeem low tours in MVM, as they have even more experience on average. And world peace would be achieved, and everybody would get a golden frying pan. In conclusion, TF2 is honestly not that hard to figure out, if you're smart enough to know what you're doing. With enough time and determination, any new player can become an anime profile picture 8,000 hour spy sweat. Thanks for watching, I really appreciate that. If you have anything to say about the video, or just want to give me an awesome compliment, leave a comment, because I really do actually read every comment. And hey, since the election's coming up soon too, why don't you drop your opinions down there in the comments? Who's gonna win? CJ Dinklesworth or Joshua Jablinski?